Welcome back to yet another episode. So today I'm going to try to explain the issue of missed focus versus motion blur, because I have noticed lately there have been a number of people that have complained about the lens they're using, or whichever Pentax camera they're using, pretty much any camera actually, in regards to I'm not happy with the autofocus, and everyone says that the focus is so good, but it's not, when in fact it's not that the focus is off, it's motion blur. So I'm going to take some shots which will be very difficult for me because I usually nail my focus, but I'm going to try to purposely misfocus some shots and also use a slower shutter speed than what is necessary for razor sharp photos. So you will see the difference between missed focus and motion blur. Okay, so I'm going to start off. I'm going to take a shot of that mallard duck there. I'm going to focus just slightly in front of it, and that will actually be an out of focus shot. Then I'm going to drop my shutter speed down as much as I can in this lighting. In order to take a shot of it, I'm going to turn shake reduction off, and then you'll be able to see what motion blur looks like. And they will look similar, but they are not the same thing. So here's an example of when the focus is not on target. So these are missed focus. And here I have one that's out of focus from missed focus. The other one is too slow of a shutter speed. Even though they're similar, they are not the same thing. And here it is a perfectly focused and the correct shutter speed for the image. Okay, so I know you're most likely wondering, that's fantastic that there's a difference between motion blur and having the actual subject slightly out of focus, but how do you know which one is which? Like, how do you stop that from happening? Well, a lot of that comes down to how you're holding the camera. With a large lens like this, you're basically wanting to stabilize it by holding it further out so you're completely stable. If you're holding it closer to your body, there's a lot more chance for movement, is for one. The other thing is just knowing your settings and not being afraid to push the shutter speed to a higher amount. There is a rule of whatever the focal length is, you want to use that shutter speed or the minimum of that shutter speed. In other words, if you're shooting, for example, the 150-450, and you're shooting at 450 millimeters, then you want to have your shutter speed at about 1/500th of a second. That will, even with stabilization off, or shake reduction off, that will still combat your hand moving the lens, with very, very slight movement. It's not the be-all end-all fix in regards to how shaky you may be. I have some days where I've had way too much coffee and I'm shaking all over the place. Stabilization at a very extended telephoto distance or length of the lens is not going to help at the end of the day. So keep that in mind. And just go out, experiment, shoot, and every single person will have their own minimum that they can that they can shoot stable. There we go. So for some people, it may be, if you're using a 450 millimeter lens, that might be 1/320th of a second, right? For some people, it may be 1/500th of a second. Some other people, it may be 1/1000th of a second. But you also have to pay attention to the subject that you're trying to shoot and make sure that your autofocus settings are correct. Once you have some of these things down pat and you've taken some experimental photos, that's the big thing. Go out and try different things. Figure out what works for you. Then when you're out in the field and you're looking at the images, you're like, oh, that's slightly out of focus. What happened there? Check your shutter speed. Oh, that bird was actually pretty close to filling up the frame. It was moving at a fairly high speed. I was shooting at 1/1000th of a second, looks slightly blurred. Raise your shutter speed to 1/2000th of a second, 1/1600th of a second. Take another shot. If that one looks perfect, then your settings are correct. And just go from there. So that is basically how you would go about trying to minimize any of these issues before you start blaming the camera's autofocus system. They do look similar, as I said, but they are not the same thing. So you got to get your settings right before you start to do the whole blame game. And that's it. If you like the video, leave a like. If you have not already, please do subscribe. Always helps out. I'm a little hyper today. If you want to support the channel, that info is at the bottom of the description. If you have any questions or comments, always feel free to leave them down below. I do my best to answer every single one. And I'm gonna go. You'll see me on my next video. I'm out.